Bam.
I'm Alec Lace, and you are watching the Break It Down show.
Me and Alec, man, we fuck things up. We get it done. You just told me that you recently had Steve Harvey on your show, and that's badass. You've got Matthew McConaughey over one shoulder, you got Tony Hawk over the other. I think a little bit of Kurt Warner in there, and is that Dana White?
Yep.
I'm confused. Where's Pete Turner? I am in that list. I'm just not over the shoulder good though, you know.
Well, Pete, I'll tell you what, I'm almost at my 600th episode here, so there's so many dads to rotate in and out of the backdrop. One of the big things people come on, they say, hey, how do I get my face on a backdrop there, you know? So it's definitely a rotation for sure. I've been very blessed to have so many of these awesome dads join me from all spectrums, Pete, whether they're military guys like yourself, or I got sports athletes, I got business leaders. What a blessing it is, and what an important message. It couldn't be any more timely than it is right now, because we need it.
Yeah, we always need it, right? We need it. And especially right now, like you're saying, the show is called, just for everybody to know, the show is called First Class Fatherhood. Alec has built an incredible show. We met through Robert Vera is like, hey, you got to talk to this guy, Alec. He's doing something special. This is years ago now. You were already on your way then, but we were just talking off mic, like, hey, man, we're both like still, look, we have fantastic shows. We are well established. You've got 600 episodes. I've got 1,300 episodes. We both know what that means. And yet here we are, largely undiscovered. You have done it, though. I mean, like, you're crushing it. And yet there's still so far to go up the mountain. And for anyone who doesn't realize this, Podcast Mountain, we're above the first percentile. It's very steep up here. But you have done it, and yet there's so far to go. What are your thoughts on that, man?
I'm still learning the game, Pete. To be honest with you, like I said, I'm working for the railroad for 22 years, and I'm still very new to this. I'm 4 years into doing it, and I'm having a blast, and I'm trying to get up to speed as quick as I can on the craft. There's a lot of skill sets, as you know, involved in doing this stuff. Not only just the getting in front of the camera and talking to people part, but everything behind the scenes that it takes to set these things up, the hours of time that goes into it. And it gets painstaking at times, especially when you don't see the success you're hoping to find. And you're dedicating so much of your life to it. And then, little by little, you keep at it. You keep that faith. You keep the belief. You believe in your message, and things start to work out. And like I said, to have guys that have come on, like you mentioned, Matthew McConaughey, Tony Hawk's been on twice. These guys to come on and share this once they do, it really, I mean, you can't buy advertising like that. So, I mean, that really has been a big part of the success of the show is when the guys come on, they have a great experience. They love talking about being a father, and they're happy to share it.
The main reason why you're on, I want to point this out to people, is that you've got a new book out, and it just came out this week. So let's talk about, there it is, First Class Fatherhood. And by the way, if no one else has said it, because I know you just announced it, it only came out this week, #1 bestseller already, and crushing in a number of categories. So first off, thanks, man. And thanks from the dads, all of us out here, to create something that's dad friendly, allows dudes to be dudes and dads to be dads. So yeah, you wrote a book, man, and it's killing.
Yeah, and I tried to put as much of the advice and wisdom as I could into the book, Pete. We broke it down into several chapters as far as it can relate, and it goes to all dads, single dads, divorced dads, whether you're married for a couple of decades, wherever you're if you adopted kids, there's something in there for everybody. And I know one of the I focus on the fatherless crisis, and a big part of that, Pete, is the divorce court. I had Greg Ellis on the podcast. He wrote a phenomenal book, calling it the Family Court Cartel. So many dads have been just pushed out of their families' lives because of these devastating court dramas that take place. Yeah. So that's a big, serious issue that's got to be addressed. And that's why I love what Governor DeSantis did down in Florida. I pray to God that more states will follow suit and try to address this fatherless crisis that we got going on, because we're trying to solve all these other issues, Pete. But unless we get to the bottom of this and strengthen our families and make that the main focus, we're just running around in circles.
Yeah, man. And here in California, my buddy Tony, and I'm not going to say anything more to identify him more than that, but my buddy Tony hasn't seen his kid in years, and his kid is being indoctrinated to hate him. The court system and the police cannot help him reliably. And he's desperate to see his kid. He is not a problem dude. All you have to do is be with this dude for like a week and watch him work and watch him. He should be with his kid. And the fact that we don't have that, and the government really builds a system that doesn't allow that, man, you're right. That is a big problem. Look, any parent should be, as long as they're in some way halfway normal, most of the way, a third of the way normal, they should be around their kid. Moms, dads, whatever it is, grandparents who fill in.
And
But yeah, this dad thing, it's crazy.
one thing I do want to make sure I always stipulate when I say this stuff, Pete, too, is it's not to take away anything from the single moms that are out there and they are working
Of
miracles.
course.
And I always get that blowback from them, and I always make it quick to say, because they'll hit me up and say, hey, I raised my son without a dad in the home, and he turned out to be a success. And I always make sure to say, I'm not saying that you can't be successful if you don't grow up with a father in the home. What I'm saying is 85% of the guys that are sitting in the detention centers right now across this country had no father in the home. 71% of the kids dropping out of high school have no father in the home. So it's a major, major issue. And the states that are involved in this, from a political aspect, from every other part of society, we have to realize and recognize fathers are vitally important to not only just their kids' lives, but to the society at large.
We always want to talk about how science, and we want to celebrate science, the social science in on this is that you need two parents, if at all possible, and no denigration to any single mom or dad or anybody who's struggling to try to do it. But we know through, longitudinal studies, we're not talking 5 minutes. We're not talking new science. We're talking established science. Having two parents in the house, the more books in the house, the more spoken words, the higher the vocabulary, all of these things make for happier, healthier, more productive kids. So you're right, man. It's a good mission to do. And if I'm going to be unfair, I don't think it's unfair. If I'm going to be candid, I'm going to say this: we tend to put down the father role. We tend to talk about toxic masculinity and all these other things. And it takes a village. Now, first and foremost, it takes two parents to raise a child. You might need some help from other people. We all agree with that, but God, we got to have dads in there, man.
Yeah, and I think pop culture doesn't do any justice to it. I talk about that in the book, First Class Fatherhood, as well, just about how we see dads portrayed on TV. Dad is always the dope. Dad's
Yeah.
always the butt of the joke. And dad joke. It's a big hashtag on Twitter and on Instagram, dad jokes. We don't have the mom jokes hashtag. It's not, mom's not considered the joke. And especially, too, one of the big parts I focus on in the book, Pete, is trying to tell other dads to be an ambassador for fatherhood. When a woman gets pregnant and tells the girls, oh, I'm going to have a baby, there's a big celebration. Oh, my God, you're glowing. Oh, we're going to have a baby shower. When the guy tells his boys, oh, I'm having a kid. Oh, my God, your life's over. Your love life is shot. You ain't going out with us no more. And it's always doom and gloom at every stage. Like, for some reason, guys feel like they have this need to warn the young dad. Wait till they start teething. Wait till he starts walking. I'm trying to encourage the younger dads, hey, turn that around, man. Let's start encouraging the young fathers to stay in it, because this is the greatest chapter in their life that's just beginning here. So we got to keep our young fathers encouraged and engaged with their kids.
Yeah, no, I agree with you 100%. And just to echo your point about the dopey dad on TV, I love the Goldbergs, but the dad just yells, wears no pants, and he's basically a joke all the time. One episode every other season or so, he was allowed to be an important guy, and that was when he let his true feelings show. And it's so tropey, and it's so similar all the time. Like, dads can be an important part. Dads are an important part of their kids' lives. And you're right, it is the most important thing you'll do is to create another human who's viable and part of a community. I mean, that's why I love scouts. When you see scouts graduating up and they're in their teens and late teens, everything, these are people that are plugged into their community. They already have a heart for charity. They know how to work hard. And you see, look, dads and moms are involved in scouts like this. These are great kids being raised in these programs.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more, Pete. And just saying, somewhere along the line, it went from like the dad. You wouldn't think about insulting the dad. Like back in the day, you had like even shows up to the Brady Bunch with a Mike Brady, or you had the Little House on the Prairie with the Mike Landon, the strong father character that was there. He wasn't the joke. And then it kind of switched into that Al Bundy kind of loof doof sitting on the couch with his hand in his pants, and it kind of went south from there. The Bart Simpson type dad role that we see. So we got to get back to showcasing the father in the strong role that he plays not only just in the family, but in the community and in our country.
Lauren Green, another great dad figure on Bonanza. That was another great one. I want to get back to the book, because one of the things that I know from doing, over 1,000 interviews is there is so much wisdom. I always say all the time, I collect wisdom, right? And hopefully I can keep enough of it in my head. I do so many shows, I've got to go back and refresh, but there are some pearls that I get and I'm like, God dang it. Either I already believe that and do that and need to do it more, or I need to add that in. So what are some of the things that stuck out to you? Like, I mean, obviously you want to pick the big names, right? You want Tony Hawk in there, but you're talking to hundreds and hundreds of dads. What's out there? What have you learned, man?
Well, I'll tell you, well, one thing that was great, Ryan Mickler is one of the guys I look up to. He's been in this space for a while. He really is crushing it with the Order of Man podcast. I did the interview with him, and the way he put it was, my job as a dad is to render myself obsolete, and saying that my job is to put myself out of a job. And I love the way he described it. I never really looked at it in that way. So it's just certain ways guys will say things like that make you kind of like look at it differently, especially Jocko Willink when he talked about discipline and disciplining his kids, and saying that my biggest I didn't know what to expect when I asked him that question, kind of thinking like he's the man on discipline. And he said, my biggest disciplinary tool is to ask questions to my kids. What are you looking for an outcome there? And sit down and ask them questions and listen. So there's always something to learn from these interviews, Pete, because everybody, even though we're all fathers, we're all in the same boat, we all have a little bit of a different finesse when it comes to disciplining our kids. And especially, I love to listen to the guys like Steve Harvey, who just talked about some of the challenges he went through with his kids when they began dating, because I'm just at the onset of that. My oldest is 15. I talk to guys that, their kids are grown up, married, have kids of their own. So that's all beneficial to me, because they're at stages I haven't gotten to yet. And I love to listen to dads that come from a different street than I do. They've adopted kids. Love to learn about that, how they're handling their co-parenting situations, which are so vitally important right now. So all across the spectrum here, there's always something to learn, and dads come at it from a different angle, but we are all connected in that way, no matter what background. I've had gay dads on the show. I've had Christian dads, Muslim dads from every walk of life. And I love to get a chance to listen to their perspective, because it's eye-opening, and I try to capture the best wisdom that I can.
I'm 52 years old, and for me, when I hear Deion Sanders talk, he just caught me at the perfect time. I just love to hear what he has to say, and every time he talks about being a father, I'm always impressed with his approach. And, one of the times it was on Twitter, like his kid was repping like being on the street, and Deion's like, "Man, you're not from the street." He called his own kid out publicly, and then his kid's like, "Yeah, you're right." But like guys like that who've had everything handed to them and made all the mistakes. I mean, he approached suicide, right? How did he get through? What did you pick up from Deion? I mean, he's such an interesting character.
Deion said, we got to get back to, to the discipline with our kids, and he talked about that and saying, it's looked at in a bad way, he's saying now. And I agreed with him when he said that, because, I've done a lot of interviews since I've interviewed him. And one of the most common things, Pete, when I talk to these guys and I'll ask them the discipline question, is it different than the discipline style you grew up with? Almost 90% of these guys say, oh, yeah, it's very different than what I grew up with. I grew up with the paddle, or I grew up with the belt, or I grew up with the switch. And they'll say, oh, no, I don't do that with my kids. I don't lay a hand on my kids. Now, some of it, Pete, I think is because they're afraid to admit openly on a public forum that they spank their kids, because it's so frowned upon. But Deion was saying, hey, we got to get back to that, to discipline these kids. And on that point, too, I did an interview with Edgerrin James down at his condo in Miami, and he talked about, because his son is an up-and-coming football player as well, but he's not coming from those humbling beginnings that he did. So it's a totally different narrative for these guys that grew up, like Edgerrin James came from very, very humble beginnings, and his kids have access to everything they could want, top trainers, top this. So it's not that same struggle, and it's hard to recreate that when you don't have it, like you referred to with Deion Sanders there. It's just so hard to do that. But a big part of it comes from the father disciplining the kid, no matter how much money or how much wealth they have. If they discipline their kids, like Eric Trump, when Eric Trump came on the show, one of the big things with his father was drilled in his head, no drinking, no drugs, no smoking, and kept those kids on the straight line. And people.
Looks like we might have lost Alec for a second, so I'll hold the line here for him. I don't know what happened. He popped out. We'll get him back in a second. But he was talking about Eric Trump and the example that Donald Trump, as much as we want to hate on Donald Trump, he professed to his kids, don't drink, don't smoke, work hard, those kind of things. And it's not an advocacy for Donald Trump, but I mean, look.
Sorry about that, Pete. I dropped out. I was just saying there. People will say, "Oh yeah, they got a ton of money. That's why they're doing all this thing and they have success." I say, there's a lot of people that are millionaires that end up with a needle in their arm in a cemetery. They make it sound like, "Oh, it's so simple." Yeah, a lot of these guys, we see them fall down with the money. And it's one thing that's important to me. I'm a recovering alcoholic, recovering addict. So that's a part of this dynamic too that I try to drill into my own kids. And so there's so much to pick up from so many of the dads on the show, Pete.
You're talking discipline over and over again, and I get it, man. We need to have discipline, and I definitely am. Let me see if I can say this in a way that makes sense. I'm not at all for abusing kids, but sometimes boys especially get so locked in, you need to put your hands on them. Grab that face mask, shake it around. I like to put a bear paw bunk on their chest, not in no way harming them, but like boom, reset them so they're like, like, hey, are you with me now? And they're like, yeah, I am. I'm like, okay, you got to reorient kids sometimes. Girls, I don't think that not as much with that, but putting your hands on your kid in a loving way, in a corrective way, I see no problem with that. Again, and we're not talking about abuse here.
Right. Yeah, I always have to make that stipulation as well. But there's a big major difference between beating a child and spanking a child. So
Yeah.
obviously, we're not talking that. But and I agree with you there too. I got 4 kids, and each one of them requires a different style of discipline. So one, you could spank them all day long, you ain't going to get anywhere with them. The other one, you could threaten to spank him, and he's going to listen right away. But one book that I recommend for a lot of parents is
Yeah.
The 5 Love Languages by Gary
Mhm.
Chapman. And because it's one book that say for couples to do that are in a relationship, but I also really highly recommend you do it with your teenage kids. It gives you a real big insight into how they give and receive love, and it really helps with the discipline portion.
Everybody should go check out your website. Look, it's not hard. Just type in First Class Fatherhood. Alex done a great job with his marketing. But if you go to the website, you can find everything there. Obviously, all of these social media platforms and all of the podcast platforms have his show. So you guys definitely go there. But just First Class Fatherhood, type that in, and you're going to find your avenue that you like. And it's fantastic. And then also, let me put this link for the book up here. Best-selling, number one best-selling, I lost Alec again. Number one best-selling book, First Class Fatherhood, Advice and Wisdom from High-Profile Dads. And that's available on Amazon, and that's a great way to support the show. And my man Alec is back in studio. Let me grab him again.
I don't know why that keeps happening. I apologize, Pete, if that's on my end. I don't know why that happens.
Yeah, it's all right. We're going to make it happen. It could be my end, too. Wireless is wireless. It gets crazy. So one of the things I wanted to ask you about, in addition to all of these fantastic guests, is, look, people ask me all the time, how do you get all these incredible guests? And the number one thing I say, and you'll appreciate this, I ask, like, hey, Edgerrin James, would you love to do my show? And then they'll usually go, and I have a special way of asking for sure, but they often say yes. Just a few minutes ago, and this is 100% true, I booked Bruce Dickinson, the lead singer from the band Iron Maiden, right?
Awesome.
How did I get him? I networked in, I asked, I worked things. How do you get Edgerrin James, Kurt Warner, Tony Hawk, Steve Harvey, all on and on and on? I know how you got me. You asked, so I said yes. But how'd you get these other guys?
I would say, Pete, I must get that question at least 10 times a week. I'm getting that from podcasters and people, and it's the number one thing that I get. And it really no different than the way you do. I sometimes feel like people think I hold the secret key to booking guests on my show, and I wish it were that simple. I could be selling it make a fortune on it, but it really is no different than, other than, like you said, is asking. Ask and you shall receive. I mean, that's really the number one key. And I try to tell people, I mean, I'm a faith-based person too, and I also always throw at them Mark 11:24, which says, whatsoever you ask for in prayer, believe you have received it and it will be yours. So you got to believe in what you're doing. Believe that these guys want to talk to you. If you don't believe it, they're not going to believe it either. So you got to have faith in what you're doing and believe in the mission that you're on. If you're just like, oh, this guy's never going to talk to me, he never will.
Yeah. I'm right into the camera. If you are a podcaster, if you're doing anything where it involves getting somebody famous, never, ever, ever borrow no. Just ask them. And if they ignore you, you are in the exact same spot as you were before you asked. There was no damage done. But I will say this, though. I know you and I both work really hard on the pre-production side. And when I tell my clients, by the way, I help people put podcasts together. If you want my help, let me know. I mean, it's 10 hours to 1 hour of content, because when you chase, I don't know, Peyton Manning, you chase Peyton Manning and he doesn't say yes. And your follow-up and everything else, hours and hours to get nothing, but you have to stay persistent. Hey, put a book out. Let me ask. Right. And so that pre-production time goes into that. And the amount of work that goes into that, the post-production, the social media, God dang it, I lost them again. God dang. That social media work that you have to do, it's vital to be able to run a successful show. So these things aren't easy, but it is something that's accomplishable. You just have to dedicate yourself to it. And in Alec's case, he's got, a job, part-time job. He's got his kids to raise, and he's got a podcast.
And that's what I referred to earlier. There's so many skill sets involved in this, Pete. And you're right. There's times I've had 60 to 80 email correspondence just to never get the guests on the show. But that's the kind of commitment it has to take. My ratio is usually 1 out of every 10 that I reach out to, I get on my show. So for every one guy you see, there's 9 that said no. So it's that kind of ratio for me, and it's a persistence that you have to take, and you got to believe in what you're doing.
You got to believe. You got to believe. And it helps when you write something. Man, Alec's connection is not helping me out here today. That's just how this is going to be. Hey, everybody, it's the Break It Down Show. If you want to support the Break It Down Show, here's one of the things you can do. You can go to the Break It Down Show store. You can go to breakitdownshow.com. All the resources there, top of the page. There's the show store where you can get t-shirts and swag. You can also go to that PayPal link. If you click on that PayPal link, you can create your own subscription. You want me to do something for you? Just let me know what it is. If you're like, hey, Pete, I want to buy you a tank of gas. Here's $100. Great. You can, that's a great way to support the show by just going to PayPal and hitting that link and setting something over to me to help me cover. Look, as Alec will tell you, there's a lot of costs in running a show. There's cost for marketing. There's cost for PR, all kinds of things that cost money. Alec, are we trying no video now? Is that what we're trying?
Can you hear me now, Peter? No.
I can hear you. Yeah. Boy, we're struggling with this thing today. All right. That's wireless for you. That's the modern times. The book is called First Class Fatherhood, Advice and Wisdom from High Profile Dads. Dads like, again, Jocko Willink, Tony Hawk, a whole variety of dads. He even got Eric Trump. He's actually been approved as a press guy to go into the White House. Pretty cool. He's been approved to go to the Super Bowl on a press pass. This is a guy that really gets it. And taking everything out of this, the magic sauce that he has with his show is that he's covering these things dads want to talk about being dads, and it really it makes a difference for people's lives. And I love that Alec is doing this. Hopefully we got some stability here, man. And either way, don't worry about it. We're just going to keep on rocking. That's what we do. All right. I've been talking a little bit about your production and what you have to do. Tell me about some big moments where the show broke and went forward for you, like getting access to the White House press corps. Oh my God. That's how did you manage that? How do you manage Super Bowl access? How do you figure these things out? Because I know people are like just amazed that you have this Matthew McConaughey, man. Holy guy. Wow.
Yeah, well, part of that is the persistence on it, Pete, and trying to always look for what's next, always trying to go more or bigger than what you did in the last time. And so listen, at one point in my life, I got a lifetime ban from Giant Stadium. All right. So you fast forward that, and I got the NFL inviting me to come to the NFL to interview Tom Brady and Belichick and all these guys. It's a big turnaround for me. It's a big switch. But I've done the last 4 Super Bowls, been to the White House 12 times, sat in on a press briefing. Yes. And you know what I do is I leverage the guys that I've had and I use them to try to gain access to these events. So that's why, even having Dana White on the podcast, he invited me to come with him. My wife and I, what a great date night. We sat with Dana White in his suite at a UFC event in Madison Square Garden. So those are the kind of opportunities that open up just by putting yourself out there, persisting in this stuff. So for the White House, it was during Trump's administration. I had interviewed his son, Eric. I had interviewed Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. So you leverage those to try to see how much further can I go. With the NFL, I interviewed Hall of Famers, Deion Sanders, Kurt Warner, and then you try to leverage that into the NFL. How much farther can you take it? So that's what it's all about. Look for that next opportunity. Always think bigger than where you are right now, like I'm trying to do here. Take it from the podcast. Now I got the book, and we're going to go from there. And that's it. Just keep dreaming bigger.
Do you think you'll be able to do just podcasting here? Look, you just did the 10-year picture thing and you're like, I used to drive a cab, then I drove Uber. Now you're talking to, Mike Pompeo, any Secretary of State, any of them. That is so hard to do. These guys do not have to talk to you, right? So do you see yourself doing this full time sometime here in the near future with your book and the podcast and the other revenue that's coming in?
I would love to, Pete. The major goal here is to build a financial wall around my family that nothing can penetrate. That's the goal. So whatever it takes to get to there is what I'm going to do. But right now I'm having fun, Pete. So I'm trying to, as much as I have big goals and big aspirations, if you don't enjoy where you are in this moment, like I am right now talking to you, then none of it is worth anything. So I try to keep myself grounded and stay present where I am and what I'm doing. Like when I'm in the middle of interviewing Mike Pompeo, I'm interviewing Mike Pompeo. I'm right there because I'm enjoying that moment because it's It's a special moment, just like all these are. So yes, I want to get bigger and bigger, but I don't want to lose sight of what I got right now, right in front of me. And I'm thankful for it. And Mike Pompeo, I interviewed him once while he was the Secretary of State. And then I just had him on again on the show recently, so it's building a good relationship with these guys. And it's been, that's part of it too, is learning how to network and learning how to leverage those relationships to get to the next one. The Navy SEALs, I started with one Navy SEAL. I've had over 65 of them on the podcast now because one wants you to interview this guy. Oh, I went to buds with that guy. And you never know where the next interview is going to lead you to.
Yeah. On our shows, because we've had success with this aspect of it, I can lead with here's the bona fides of the show, 1,300 episodes. We've had Hall of Famers from a variety of things. Our musicians have sold 1.7 billion records, and you just they've won Grammys, Oscars, Pulitzer Prizes, Medal of Honors, Peabody Awards. And then the person's like, just okay, let's go. It just becomes totally normal. Yeah. Green Berets, gosh, easy, SEALs, easy, no problem at all. We're able to do it. Do you get sick of staying in the same zone? Like, oh, we're talking about fatherhood again. Okay, we're going to talk about discipline again. How do you keep it fresh for you, man?
Yeah, I love it, Pete. And what's funny is, even in the book, First Class Fatherhood, you'll see the responses on the same category are so different. And that's one of the things the publisher and the editors were noticing when I was sending in the content and doing each chapter. They were like, wow, I didn't realize how different the perspective is from all these different dads. So especially different guys got different things going on. If you're talking to a dad that just adopted, like I did, Jesse Barrett, his wife, Amy Coney Barrett, became a Supreme Court justice. So there's a unique perspective. They got 7 kids, 2 are adopted, one's got Down syndrome. So he's coming from a totally different level than the guy that I just interviewed yesterday, who has 2 kids. And so everybody's got a different scenario. So it always stays fresh because people have fresh stories.
And there's a movement to kind of denigrate people who adopt kids for some reason. I don't know what that is. I mean, these kids want to be adopted. They don't want to live in the life they're at. They don't want to be in an orphanage. And especially if they have some kind of disability. Well, a buddy of mine adopted 2 kids from China and they have significant medical problems. And he's just dadding them out. Like, he's doing it and he loves it and he writes about it all the time. And it's gorgeous, beautiful writing. And he clearly adores his kids. And we need more of those conversations instead of these half-baked, you can't raise a kid if they don't look like you conversations, because the reality is it's just BS, right? Like, these kids need help. They need access to things like medical care. You get hit with a stick and thrown into an alley in a lot of countries if you aren't a perfect baby at the right time.
Yeah, I have nothing but the biggest amount of respect for dads who adopt, moms who adopt. I've had quite a few dads on the show that have adopted. And I don't think there's any more greater form of love than to be able to take a child into your home that's not yours, make them yours, and raise them and give them the love. I mean, Pete, if we can get more people doing that, we can solve a lot of problems here, because there's so many kids that need that home and that foundation right now. And I would love to see it just as much as you would.
Yeah, it turns out you can always lean on love because it never fails. It's infinite in its power. It's better than nuclear energy. When you look at being a father or a parent in general, and you look at I call it the book of parenting. It's here. You can't really see it, but you get it in your head as you do it. And you realize there is no page 346, which you swear to God has the reference for the thing that you need. But like, how do I deal with this problem? Right. You've got all this access to all these people who are incredible. They're successful. They have all these different approaches, but so much of the book of parenting has to be written in the moment. Mike, like, there are some things where, like, if your kid will not comply, at some point you run out of things you can do. And you're like, now what do? I tried the hammer. I tried the screwdriver. I tried the wrench. We're talking just like, metaphorically here. Right. But you've tried all the tools that you have. And you're like, I have to invent a new tool now to deal with this. And maybe that'll work. So when you think about the book of parenting and all of the lessons that aren't in there yet, that nobody's captured, you're trying with your book already, putting some new things in there, but there are so many lessons. And like you said, every echelon of your kid's life, like, my kid's going to be 25 next month. What kind of parent am I? How do I help guide her through this next phase of her life? And then how do I as a parent stay out of her way and let her stumble and fall like I did when she was, 9 months old, learning how to walk?
I think that's the beautiful part of this entire journey, Pete, is that we don't know what's coming. My oldest is 15. I've never had a 16-year-old, so I don't know
Yeah.
what that's all about yet. So that's the part that keeps it fresh for you because you're learning just as they are in life. I've never done it before. So as much as I've been a parent now for 16 years, never had a 16-year-old or a
Yeah.
17-year-old. So that's something new that's coming to me. And one point I want to make here is something that really meant a lot to me, Pete, and I really want to encourage dads to do this as well, is I remember when we had our first kid. I think we had two at the time, and we were out eating at a restaurant.
Yeah.
And an elderly couple came over and said to us as they were leaving, I just want to let you guys know your kids are so well behaved. You guys are doing a great job. And I can't tell you what that did for my wife and I to kind of lift our spirits. Because when you're a young dad into the game, you question yourself. Am I doing this right? Am I a good dad? And you worry about, am I disrupting everybody's dinner while we're out? Are we making it? So that made such an impact on me that I make sure that when we are out and we are anywhere and I see a young couple with kids that are struggling, I always make it a point to go over and say, hey, I just want to let you know you're doing a great job. And it could really mean so much to a young parent that's out there. So I'd love to see more dads, more parents do that for others that are out there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And in general, just that thing where like, hey, whatever you're doing is hard. I get it. You're working as hard as you can and doing your best. Because what a parent would never do after you say that, they never go,
Right.
which is a little reference, but I think it's perfect. Like, yeah, I know, I'm a great parent. Usually we think we're the crappiest parent around, but it turns out as long as you can get these kids kind of safely through it, they will figure a lot of this stuff out, and providing that foundation, that's all you really can do, right? And at some point, they've got to fashion their own lives.
Yeah, that's it. And that's why, guys, back to what Ryan Mickler said, you got to render yourself obsolete at some point. That's it.
Mhm.
It's their life. So you try to just instill as many tools as you can, as many values as you can. You give them that guiding light and be there for them when they stumble. They're going to fail. And that's one of the hard parts of it. You know that, Pete, that they have to fail in order to learn. And to watch them fail is a
Yeah.
difficult and challenging thing to do. You got to get comfortable watching that sometimes. But unless they do it, they're never going to learn the big lessons in life sometimes.
My daughter thought because she watched a lot of Grey's Anatomy, she thought she wanted to be a doctor. And I'm like, it is great. Anybody can become a doctor. Here are the areas where you're going to need to focus. You are not an academic horse right now, right? So you don't become a doctor unless you are willing to just like burn hours of your life away to become this thing. So, and if not, that's fine. It's okay to not become a doctor, but figure out, is this worth it to you to spend 20 hours a day studying and going to school and maybe working a job, all of these things. And that's a unique kind of parenting. And now that she's older, I say things like, hey, because I love you and I'm so proud of you, there's very little for me to do for you now, but I always want to tell you to bring your jacket. I always want to tell you to be careful. I always want to tell you to call me, but I try not to do those things because I know that you know these things. And it's just my way of like letting her know that I care deeply. And I always, always want to care for her, but I also respect that she's an adult now.
Yeah, and going back into what we were talking about, producing a podcasting show.
Yeah.
The question I was getting all the time after I was doing it for a year and then 2 years, like, you're still doing this? Like, are you making any money? That was the second question. How are you getting these guys, and are you making any money? And so, I'm still only in this 4 years. Now, if you, like, your daughter wants to be a doctor, you have to go to school. Not only do you have to spend countless hours studying, you got to pay a lot of money in order to become the doctor before you even start making a nickel. So it's the same thing here. I've dedicated you. You have to be able to be dedicated and put the time in it when there is no money. If you're doing it for the money in the beginning, you're totally lost. You're never going to last, because that's not what it's. You have to be able to hone the craft, learn the skills, dedicate the time and the countless hours in order to do it. The payoff will come down the line, but you've got to stay with it.
Look, you're a sports fan, I can tell, because you've been kicked out of Giant Stadium. Do you get starstruck when you're talking to, like, oh my God, it's Jim Burt?
No, I haven't gotten starstruck. I would say the most nervous I got doing an interview was probably when Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, the first time I interviewed him, because he was the current Secretary of State, and there were like 4 people on the call. It was like it was like I was on the call for like 10 minutes before he even came on. It was like one of these things, this person, like all this different stuff. But no, I haven't gotten starstruck, because I think when you look at these guys just like they are, as dads, as human beings, I mean, it makes it, we're talking about something that's familiar with me. And one of the things about being at the Super Bowls with these guys is everyone at these media days is always asking them these crazy questions, ones that they get 100 times about sports and stuff. And then when I come in and I ask ask them about being a father, their face lights up. All of a sudden, they look you directly in the eyes, and they get serious with their answers. And you can see the smiles on their face and the impact it makes, because it's the only thing that truly matters to these guys.
Yeah.
So I love doing it, and I have a blast.
Let me hit you with my father question then. And I agree with you, like finding those questions that make them think or make them go, that's a great question. That's a KPI for me. I'm like, yes, great question. All of these guys, all of us make mistakes as fathers. When was the last time you made a mistake as a father?
Last night, I did that with my two little ones. They could be like cats and dogs sometimes. I have one daughter, she's my youngest, and I punished my son when it was really my daughter's fault, and
Yeah.
I was adamant that it was him, and it wasn't. And so it was one of those things where I turn around and I have to say, hey, I'm sorry, I got that one wrong. And I talk about that too, Pete. Like, I never remember my father ever saying he was sorry for anything, even if he was in 100% wrong. Never did it. He would never give up the goat. He was kind of like Jesse Smollett in a way. Like, he would never give it up, So it's one thing that I'm willing to do now. And when I recognize it, I say, man, you know what? Dad got that one wrong. And I'm okay saying that and making sure that I rectify it.
I love it, man. And then when you talk to your guests, do you bring that kind of question up? Because look, we learn so much when we realize a mistake. And like you said, the accountability, like, hey, I'm always going to try my best. I'm always going to love you. Sometimes I'm going to screw up. Sometimes you're going to screw up. We'll work it out.
Yeah, almost all the dads that I interview are very vulnerable with their answers. They don't really sugarcoat anything. And I think because of the level of people I'm talking to, they're not afraid to admit when they're wrong. And I think that's a big part of being successful too. I don't think, you get very far when you're not willing to admit your mistakes, and because then you never learn and grow from them. So the guys that I've had on have been very transparent. You learn a lot of stories. I remember Howie Mandel talking about stories because he has all that germaphobe stuff. And when his daughter was potty training, he got in a terrible situation where she pissed all over him and everything. But he also told a story about how he got it wrong when he thought she was smoking weed, and he dragged her out of school, and it ended up being fish food in the little bowl at home. And it was a total disaster and mistake. But he told that story like it was a big learning lesson for him as a father, because he embarrassed his daughter and he was 100% in the wrong. And he talked about being able to admit that and move on from it.
Yeah. Yeah. Boy, I'll tell you what. So one of the things that I've learned from being a dad and just being like trying to be a good dude, right? Like there's certain things that I put into myself: grace, patience, tolerance. These are things. And that patience thing goes right to that mistake that Howie made, which I've made similar mistakes, gosh, 100 times. Every year I go back to my high school and I'm like, hey, I'm 52 years old. I'm you in the future. What would you like to ask me? I don't have to do that. I don't get paid to do it. I go twice a year and I talk to the seniors, and I tell them, like, you all are a lot more adult than you're being treated right now, because parents and teachers see you as little kids. I'm going to see you like an adult. I'm going to be honest with you. You can ask me questions about anything. But that's part of the continued dad experience for me, is to go out and like, you may never use my advice, but I'm going to be here regardless. It's a great cost to me. I mean, I got to travel and everything else, but I always do it because I think it's a service to my community as a dad. And I'm not the world's greatest dad or nothing. I wasn't even around a lot because I was in Iraq and Afghanistan, but that's one of the ways I try to continue to lead young people.
And I love what you do. I love you for it, Pete, because we definitely need your voice out there for this young generation like that. And it's one thing, too. I don't claim to be the best dad there is on the planet. I'm trying to be a better dad today than I was yesterday. I'm just trying to learn and improve as I go along here. Like I said, I've never been in a situation where my kids had a driver's license yet.
Yeah.
So there's a lot I haven't even seen yet as a dad. So to claim that I know it all, I'd be way off the mark. I knew a lot more when I was 18 years old than I do now. That's for sure. But definitely being able to be willing to learn and to grow and to develop and change. It's a fun ride, and I love taking it with my kids.
Is there another book in the future, now that you've got this one launched, you'll sell it for a year or so? Are you going to do another one of these, like a series, or what else are you going to do?
I could very well do another one of these. I mean, that's going to be. I'm going to talk to my literary agent about that, because since this book, when I actually handed in the manuscript for it, I've done another 200 interviews since then. There's plenty of material. Like just like yourself, I got tons of content. So it's there if I want to do it. If the interest is there and there's a call for it, I'll definitely do a second book. I may do one about my experience, my life. I mean, the sky's the limit here for what's coming. So right now we're going to sell this book and we're going to take it from there.
What's a go-to clutch question you ask that you know that these guys don't get? Like what's like, if I ever get stuck, I'm asking this question.
Well, I have different ones depending on who I'm talking to. If it's a military guy as opposed to a Hollywood actor, but one thing that I try to focus on is, especially like a Steve Harvey, when I have these guys on that have a legacy, like Dana White, when guys have a real legacy that they're building, I always try to ask them, you have this legacy that's cemented in the UFC world or the
Yeah,
sports world, but what do you want your legacy to be as a dad?
yeah.
How do you want your kids to remember you? And I love to listen to these guys that have these enormous careers talk about what they want their kids to remember about them. So I love to ask that to them.
Have you had Shaq on your show?
No, I'm in touch with his people, still trying to nail it down. He just came out with a cookbook too recently,
Yeah.
so still working on him.
The one of the things I always wonder is, like when Shaq is your dad, and he's this outsized personality, he's an outsized human. Now he can intimidate anybody, right? Like he's like, I'm the most dominant player in basketball history. But also, how do you put enough trials in front of your kid so that they're not, this entitled rich dick? Like how do these guys manage that?
Yeah, but Matthew McConaughey spoke about that while he was on the show, and it's just about trying to figure out as a parent how far to push those limits and how much to take away and how much to expose them to. I asked that to some of these guys that are going through that because they didn't, like I said with the Edgerrin James, they didn't grow up with it. Now their kids have access to everything, so that's a whole different dichotomy for them where they can't really simulate it, but they try to stay as disciplined with the kids as they can, because if not, it can lead to disastrous results, as you know, with so many of the young child actors that you see that come into success young. It does some strange things to people. So I've loved talking to the guys about that. Like I said, Matthew McConaughey went into it pretty good detail.
Yeah, no, those are I think about Bing Crosby and like what an icon he was and what a great American he was. And it was hard for him to get a reliable, good outcome from his kids because, you know, that one of the things about living in America, especially earlier on, was like you could all of a sudden become a millionaire, and you're like, how do you live a life as a millionaire? And you see Bing's kids struggle with addiction, and we don't have all the tools that we have now. All these problems that can happen. You come up from the streets in Miami, where you may, people that have been shot and killed, your friends, right? And you play football, and like Michael Irvin, and you just everywhere you go, you got a football, and you're running, you're everything. But a lot of these guys are like, I don't want my kid doing that to themselves. I know what it's done to me. So what are these guys who are elite athletes or elite performers who are like, I had to pay too much of a cost to do this career? What do these guys want their kids to do?
Yeah, and at some times that is a paradox for them, because they wouldn't be who they were if they didn't put the time in, but because they put the time in, they sacrifice that time with their kids. So it's one of those things that's regretful for some dads. I know I talked to Jimmy Johnson, the Hall of Fame football coach. He's got regrets about that because it cost him. The success he had in his life cost him a lot, and he looks back on that and he has regrets about that. So sometimes it comes down the line, and that's why too. These guys that accomplish all these things, when it comes down to it in the end, Pete, it's really the fatherhood journey, their kids, that give them the fulfillment in life. And you talk about Michael Irvin. I spoke to him at the Super Bowl, and he was so passionate about the fatherless crisis, particularly in the African American community, and just talking about how these guys got to stay on their post. He was so passionate about it when he was talking to me that it was very moving just to hear how passionate he was about it. And it not only is it a problem in the African American community, it's a problem in all communities where we're seeing it everywhere. And all these big statistics that you see, they all correlate with not having a father in the home. That's why I harp on it so much. So when you look at the teenage, drug use, teenage suicide, teenage pregnancy, it all goes right along with having no father in the home. So no matter which community you're in, it's affecting you.
People talk about a work-life balance, but that really is code for is working as much as possible and squeezing in some life. And that doesn't leave a lot of room for parenting. And I know how busy Tom Brady is. I mean, he's got a football career. He's got businesses. He's got a wife that's always on the go. How do hyper successful people like this, how do they even have time to do something meaningful with their kids?
I asked this to Kurt Warner. He came on the show twice.
He's got a bunch of kids.
He's got 7. Yep. And he's one of the guys. This is how he put it. He said, I learned a long time ago that balance doesn't necessarily mean equal, where I can't give 8 hours a day to my job. I can't give 8 hours a day to my wife, and I can't give 8 hours a day to my kids. It's impossible to do that. But when I'm with my wife, I'm going to be with my wife. When I'm at the job, I'm going to be at my job. And we all have this habit of being at the job and our mind is at home. our mind is with the kids, our mind is
Yeah.
on the coaching we're doing or whatever it is. And then when we're with the kids, our mind is on, oh my God, at the job. Your mind is back at the office or back
Yeah.
at the railroad, wherever it is that you work. So you have to stay focused and present. Just like I said before earlier in the interview here, I'm focused right now on talking to you. That's where my mind is. That's where I am right now. So that's the key to it. If you can stay present to where you are and give your 100% attention to it, then
Yeah.
I think you're giving everybody the equal that you're looking for.
When you're at your best, I asked you about your last mistake. When you're at your best as a dad, what's that look like?
I don't know. I think the best for me is sitting down with my family every night eating dinner. I mean, that's really where I feel like listening to my kids talk about themselves in a positive light,
Yeah.
looking at my kids succeeding. That's where I feel good as a dad. You know, being able to improve on something, especially when they're doing things that I wasn't good at or wasn't interested in, and I hear them talk passionately about it. Just hearing them feel good about themselves and talk about themselves, whether they're failing and trying or whether they're trying and succeeding. I just want to hear them talk about themselves in a positive way, be polite to others and stuff like that. So I love my favorite part of the day is sitting down 6 o'clock every night. We eat dinner as a family. We pray together. And that's my favorite part of the day and get a chance to really, peel back the layers and see what they're going through.
I think you've had Rob O'Neill on the show. I know for sure that you've had Matthew McConaughey. You've had all of these people that, it's incredible. Do your kids have any idea how cool you are?
My kids are my biggest support. Pete.
Okay,
They
great.
are my biggest support. So yeah, I've had Rob O'Neill on the show twice, actually. And you know what? One of the cool things was like watching the suit because last year, not this past Super Bowl, but the one before that with the COVID, everything was done virtually. So my studio right now, where I'm in, is my bedroom closet. That's where I am in my house. So we watched
I love it.
we watched the Super Bowl on the couch, and then because it was virtual, I had not only access to media day, but I had access to the post game. So as soon
Right.
as the game ended, I ran in the closet, and now I'm interviewing the guys as they were coming off the field. Tyrann Mathieu. I was the first guy to talk to him after he lost the Super Bowl. So it was so new to me,
Yeah.
and it was pretty cool for my kids to see that. We just watched the game, and now here's Dad talking to the players as they come off the field. So they like to, especially my youngest son. He loved to be able to talk to his friends about that, and they think I'm the coolest thing since sliced bread. They even had, my one son's school had me come in and teach a podcasting class to the students. I've done a few of those things virtually to different schools around the world, around the country, where I Skype in and I talk to the kids about starting a podcast and how to do it. So parts like that are pretty cool. But yeah, my family is my biggest fans.
When I had Angelo Moore on the show, Angelo Moore is the lead singer of Fishbone. And I'm trying to explain to my kid, right? Because at the time she was a little smaller. And whenever she was with me, I always bring her with me wherever I go. And I'm like, we're about to talk to Angela Moore today. Here are two things you need to know about Fishbone. If you wear a Fishbone, you're automatically cool. That's how cool the band is. And this guy is the front line guy of it. He's this complex guy who was bused to white schools as a kid, got into fights and all these other things. He's this complex guy. He's also damaged because he's been in music for 50 years, right? And so when you meet this person, this guy is like, you're never going to have his chance again. Enjoy this moment, right? And you try to explain like, okay, Kurt Warner, easy Hall of Famer, kids get that. But someone like Angelo Moore, who you may not know his name, someone like Mike Pompeo, if you don't pay attention, you have no idea who these guys are. Do you explain to your kids and to other people, like, I know you know who Howie Mandel is because he's on TV and has been for 30 years, but do you get how important it is to hear from Mike Pompeo, the guy who goes all around the world and represents the U.S., or, Angelo Moore, who sings lead for Fishbone? Do you guys get how important this is?
Yeah, and you know what's funny about that? I did an interview with Frank Bello, the bassist for Anthrax, too, and he was a great one, too. You're right. Some people, they don't know who some of these guys are, and they have these phenomenal stories. But one
Yeah.
thing I try to do, too, is I had two astronauts on the podcast. Chris Hadfield, who's like a legendary astronaut from Canada, and I had Victor Glover on the podcast, who is very well could be the first African-American to ever walk on the moon because he's a part of the
Yeah.
space mission set to launch in 2025. So I have one son, my middle son, who is fascinated with space and fascinated with astronauts and stuff. So what I do with these guys is almost do like a cameo at the end when I'm done. I say, hey, my son is a huge fan of astronauts and space, and if you could say a little hello to him, a little message, hey, so I'll do things like that they really get a kick out of my kids, especially when it's a guy that they really do know. And if it's somebody that they don't, I'll say, hey, you should think about looking into this guy. He's led a remarkable life. He's an inspiration to so many people.
Yeah.
Just like this guy Chris Norton, who was paralyzed playing high school football, never to walk again, and then he wrote a book. I think it was the longest 7 yards, something like that. He ended up walking down the aisle at his wedding, and it became like this big, huge viral moment with 1 billion views and stuff like that. But it's a guy. His story is so, and he adopted a bunch of kids too, and just such an inspirational story. So yeah, these guys out there, obviously, like you say, the Matthew McConaughey, everybody knows, but there's guys out there with nuggets of information and inspiration that a lot of people need to hear about.
You know, we're live on LinkedIn, and there are so many fathers on LinkedIn. And do you resonate at all on that platform? Does your stuff hit over there or no?
I haven't really utilized much of LinkedIn. I focus a lot on Instagram.
Yeah.
I do Twitter. I do some Facebook. And Facebook I use for the group. So if I'm doing an interview, with somebody that plays on the Kansas City Chiefs, I join a whole bunch of Kansas City Chiefs groups. You know, if I did the Anthrax interview with Frank Bello, I join an Anthrax group. That's where and then I try to get in the community there and just promote my show a little bit on Facebook there. I started TikTok not that long ago. I'm having some success there. Some of the videos I've been hitting, I'm putting up some of the quotes from the guys while they're talking on the show. So trying to build on that platform right now.
That's cool. I know you've been all over the place doing media. I see you about to go on TV all the time. What's everybody missing? What are they not asking you, man? This is the question where I let you ask the best question.
Well, I don't know. I really don't know, Pete. I mean, people are pretty good. I think we're getting the important message of the show is to get fathers more involved in their kids' lives. So, I mean, as long as we're hitting on that and talking about fathers and encouraging young fathers to stay in it, I think we're hitting it. I think just the fact that we're talking right now about fatherhood is a good part of it, just because I really think it's the #1 social issue we have going on in our country. If we could bring these family units together, get dads back into homes, I think 90% of the problems we're seeing in our country will go away. So I think that's the important part of it. I really do, Pete.
You know, this is a chance for me to talk about Advanced Peace. It's a program started by Devon Bogan. And he was on the show early on, and he went into Richmond, California, where the murder rate was through the roof. It was one of the leading, most violent cities in America. And he said, okay, I figured out what to do, because he went to San Quentin and talked to a bunch of people that had been street kids before. And basically what he invented was a case management program where he created uncles for these street dudes. And these are the most violent people in the city. And he's like, hey, man, society's left you behind. And as a city and as a people, we're sorry. We're going to work on this with you. And when you don't go to your anger management class, one of my guys who's been to jail, who's had a life sentence, he's going to come up and he's be like, hey, man, you missed that class. That's all right. I booked another one. I'll be here Wednesday at 1:00, and we're not going to fail you ever again. We're going to get, and you know what he does, Alex? He gets these guys from, you're going to go to jail or you're going to die, and probably both. He gets them to turn into like tradesmen, you know, like heavy crane operators. And it's this fascinating program. Of course, when it's couched in the press, it's like, you know, a program pays criminals to not commit crime. Like, no. He's taking the hardest criminals off of the street, creating value in their life by giving them these father figures, these uncles who are like, I don't care how effed up you are right now. I know what happens if I stay here and work with you, and it's good. So as long as you want a good outcome, you're not going to fail me. I'm not going to fail you. We're going to get there. And his numbers are through the roof. It's well over like a 70% success rate on getting these guys through this thing. For literally, the police is saying, here's your stack of dossiers. These are the guys we're going to put in jail as soon as we put our hands on them, to, you know, legitimate, tax-paying, safe citizens. It's incredible. And it's all tied to fatherhood.
Yeah, there's quite a few programs that I love to see out there. One of them is the first guy I ever interviewed on First Class Fatherhood was Eric Snow, who's the founder of the Watchdogs, which is dads of great students that are there for kids that don't have that father. And you could see, I've talked to so many dads, Pete, that didn't have that father figure in their life, but they found it in the military. A lot of these Navy SEALs didn't have a father growing up, found that father figure in the military. A lot of these NFL guys I talked to didn't have the father figure growing up, they found it in a coach. So God only knows that if these guys didn't, and they found it in the street, how, especially the SEALs or guys in the, how dangerous they could have been in the society if they didn't find it in the military. So sometimes it doesn't take much for people to go one way or the other, success or failure. And it's that fatherhood figure that could hit you in the most pivotal point in your life. I know Titus O'Neil, the WWE superstar, is a guy that I had. He's in the book as well. He's a guy whose mother was raped when she was 13 years old and had him. He grew up with no father in the house, and he always said he was going down the wrong path. Everything was going wrong in his life, and then he found that father figure. And he said if he didn't find it, God only knows what would have happened in his life. And so it's so vitally important to people to find them at the right time and turn them around.
One of the things that it's always curious to be like with the athletic coaches, Bobby Knight, Pete Carroll, Jim Mora Jr., Jimmy Johnson. These guys are fantastic dads to other people's kids. I don't know if they're great dads to their own kids. Have you explored that at all? Because what Pete Carroll does involves him back when he was at USC, leaving the stadium and walking through his neighborhoods and just being part of the community and literally saving people's lives, even if they don't become NFL players. You know, like if Reggie Bush had never played a minute in the NFL, he would have had a USC education, all those connections. And, you know, I can't remember his name right now. The wide receiver that came out and went to the Jets. What's that guy's name?
Recently?
No. It's like 10 years ago. He retired a long time ago. He always wanted the ball. Give me the damn ball. That was his thing.
Oh,
right?
Keyshawn Johnson.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, he was a kid on the streets and, you know, turned himself into something in part because he went to USC and these coaches get it. Do you find that these coaches struggle to deal with their kids as well as they deal with somebody else's kids?
Well, like I said before, Jimmy Johnson talked about that, but also, I mean, I talked to Andy Reid down at the Super Bowl, and he's a guy that's had success with some of his players that have been able to turn around. But his own kid, he had problem with his sons with drugs, alcohol, and he got his son on the team, positioned on the team so he could stay close to him to watch over him. But then it was a tragedy thing last year at the Super Bowl. His son got in that DWI, smashed into a car again. So he hasn't been able to keep his son. But part of that is, you know what? Evil can take you away. So, I mean, a lot of this is drug, alcohol problems that we have. We have major problems in this country with drugs and alcohol, no matter what. You have a father in your home or not. I mean, that stuff just seems to get you, and it doesn't let go of some people. So, yeah, definitely some coaches just have a knack. I think maybe it's because of that pressure is taken off of you that it's not your kid. Maybe some of that makes it difficult or different and gives you the ability to. But some of these coaches and some of these guys in the military, they just have a way of being a leader and getting people to follow them. And I don't know what that is. I think that's an inborn talent or skill. But some people you could definitely see they have it.
Yeah. Hey, man, listen, I've had you for about an hour. Do you want to ask me anything before we go? Otherwise, we'll wrap it up.
What do you got coming up here, Pete? What's next for you? You got a book of yourself. You got all this content. What do you plan on doing with all?
I'm trying. I'm so busy doing the damn show. I don't leave enough time to work on my book. And I know you identify with that. And I can't say no. I get these guests and I'm like, yes. And so it sucks up a lot of my time. I really need to be more disciplined. I really do. And realize that there's plenty of shows. I've already done a lot of them, you know, and I want to do the exact same thing that you're doing is take these lessons and put them into a variety of books because this knowledge is just out there for people who want to consume it. So,
well, let's get on it. You got twice as many episodes as I do. I know you got twice as much content, so you'll be able to pull some gems for sure.
I know. I'm actually working on a couple of things and I am making progress on it. It's just glacial, you know? And then of course, this big episode coming up with Bruce Dickinson from Iron Maiden. I mean, that's just, I've been chasing that for a while. And look, as much as that's fun, just the tackle, I got it. We got it scheduled. It's in the books and it's like, yes. So I'm celebrating that right now. If nobody else tells you today, man, seriously, and from all 7.5 billion of us out here, thank you for what you're doing. It's important to ring this bell for people. We love moms, we love dads, and you're one of the beacons of goodness out there, and it's making a difference in people's lives. Even on the hard days when you're like, oh, I'm gonna do this damn thing. Hear me now. You're making a difference.
I appreciate that, Pete. And I've been blessed along the way to have so many great people agree to come on the show, yourself included. I really have been touched by so many guys willing to come on, share their fatherhood journey. And I pray to God it hits as many dads out there as possible.
Everybody get the book, First Class Fatherhood, Advice and Wisdom from high-profile dads. There it is. It's on Amazon. Get it wherever you want. Support this solid dude. And I will talk to you all soon. Stand by for 1 second, Alec. Hey, thanks for watching the show. I really appreciate it. Right here, you can subscribe. Please do that. It makes the show grow. Hit that notification bell so you know which incredible guest is coming up next. Down below is the PayPal link. You can put a small subscription in. That is an enormous help. All that money goes right back into the show. And then right up over here, are the next episodes you should listen to, curated by yours truly. Thank you so much for watching.